All right, thank you to everyone who's on the phone for our Training Tuesday today. My name is Heidi Reese. I appreciate you guys taking the time this Tuesday to come out and hang with us and learn about some densifiers. I am with the training department, and I'm sitting here with Chuck Hoke. And we are excited to also have Matthew Carter, who is one of our technical service managers, or is the technical service manager for chemicals, and he's going to talk to us about this. But let's talk about first some of the items that, a little bit of housekeeping. So, as you all know, you're muted so that if there's any other, dogs barking behind the scenes, everybody can hear the presentation and the recording is nice and clear. But don't let that stop you from asking any questions, either during the presentation or specifically at the end. We'll have like a 5-minute question and answer chat. You can do that through the Zoom chat functionality. Go ahead and just send it. You can either send it directly to me, Heidi Reese, or you can send it to everyone. I'll read those out and we'll get them answered for you. At the end of the presentation, we will have that question and answer. And just want to remind you that all of our webinars are recorded and then are placed out on the Dayton Superior YouTube channel, as well as DaytonSuperior.com in general. All right, so let's get started. Basically, this presentation is intended for training purposes only. For any technical or safety specifications for the products mentioned within this deck, please refer to DaytonSuperior.com, and you can find anything for those products. So moving along, just in case people don't know, who is Dayton Superior? So Dayton Superior is the leading provider of engineered solutions for the concrete construction industry. There it has it. We specialize in accessories, chemicals like we'll be talking about today, forming with proven solutions through our Simon's Forming Shoring, concrete repair and restoration, bridge deck, rebar splicing, precast, and tilt-up construction industries. We have a chemical solution that they're specifically formulated to meet the design specifications for new construction as well as any retrofit that you may have or repair issues that you may need. So let's get started today. I told you that we have Matthew Carter with us, and he's going to discuss a lot of what the densifiers are, how do they work, the industry standards around them, application techniques for them, and how can Dayton Superior help you in achieving your goals. So really, there is so much to say about Matthew because he's very passionate about what he does. And it might just take the entire, 25 minutes that we have left. So I'm just going to go a little bit into who Matthew is. He has been in the construction industry for over 20 years, working on site as well as in a dealer distributor level. He has fulfilled additional roles that include sales, managing a form rental yard, as well as a rebar shop. He has done operations management, and in 2012, he came to Dayton Superior and began his career and joined the technical service team supporting the chemical division for our company. And we're really excited to have him. And so Matthew, teach us all about getting to know our densifiers.
Oh, Heidi, that was one heck of an introduction. I appreciate that. We're going to talk about densifiers, and this is a pretty big, pretty broad topic that we're going to try to cover in a concise manner. So we're not going to touch on everything there is, but we're going to talk about a pretty good bit here. But as Heidi mentioned, we got some objectives here. We're just going to cover what are liquid densifiers and how are they working, right? Just to kind of get the nomenclature out there and figure out what we're even dealing with. What the benefits are, and maybe compare them against one or two of the other product lines that might be out there for the same type of applications. Industry standards, we'll discuss this briefly. There's not a whole lot of them out there, but there's some really good guidance. And then finally, the products that we have that we can supply to the market to give you great solutions for your application. And finally, there's different types of products out in the market, and they have different types of applications. We're just going to briefly cover what they are just so you can have a little better understanding. So what is a densifier, right? At the basic level, it's a product or chemical applied to the concrete. It's going to soak into that concrete, react inside of it, and it's going to kind of seal off the surface because we're really closing off capillaries and pores. and it's going to harden it. It's going to lock up a lot of the dust and prevent it from getting real chalky on you over time. And it does a really good job with the exposed surfaces. How does it work? You're going to see a lot of different silicates here in a minute. Potassium silicates, magnesium fluorosilicates, sodium silicates, lithium silicates, there's a bunch of them out there, colloidals. All we're trying to do is get a silicate inside that concrete to react with the calcium hydroxide, or some people call it free lime, in the concrete. And that calcium hydroxide is a principal byproduct, the original hydration of the concrete. So if you're like, hey, Matt, will these products work on brand new concrete? Yes. Will this work on concrete that's been down for 5 years? Yes. Will it be effective on concrete that's older? Yes. That calcium hydroxide is still in that concrete. It's still available, and if we introduce a silicate to it, it will react. And what it does, it produces more of the spiky crystalline structure that gives concrete its strength. And it's going to soak into that concrete, and the depth of its effectiveness is the porosity of the concrete, right? So if I've got ground, open, porous concrete, I'm going to get more absorption into the concrete. If I've got a really tight troweled surface that's brand new, I'm going to use less product, but I'm going to have a really good, effective layer on top. So again, this product is reacting in the concrete, not on top of it. It's not an acrylic or anything like that. It's not forming a membrane on the top. It's making what's there better. As I mentioned, there's a lot of different chemistries that are out there. Some of them are a little bit older. Some of them are a little bit newer. The magnesium fluorosilicates and siliconate, some of those might be a little bit older. Sodium silicates have been around forever. Sometimes you'll hear them called water glass. That it's used in parts, different industries. You've got lithiums that were developed 90s or so, and then there's a lot of colloidal silicates that are getting out in the market now. Dayton offers 3 different types of densifiers. The sodium, we got a silicon sodium, we have a siliconate blend, and then we've got a lithium silicate. And you'll see on the right-hand side the purple, green, and kind of light blue square circles in that square. This is just a real oversimplified version of comparison, and this goes into how they're applied and why they're applied certain ways. You'll see that the potassium is kind of a big, fat, round, fat molecule, right? It's comparatively speaking, so it's going to be a little bit more difficult to soak in or get into that concrete, so we might have to help it a little bit, maybe break some surface tension, maybe to work it in. Sodium silicate's pretty basic. You spray it on and it gets in the concrete, whereas the lithium is so small that it penetrates much, much easier, much better with lower effort. But that's kind of a basic level of why there are different styles out in the marketplace. So again, this is concrete's a hard sponge, right? If you look at it at a microscopic level, there's, as I mentioned, capillaries and pores. If you just take a regular old concrete, pour water in it, or pour water on it, it's going to kind of go down, diffuse, and work its way through it. And this is kind of representative, as you see here, of maybe a hard trowel piece of concrete. You're not getting a lot of good reflectance out of it because you're getting refracted light. Even if it's smooth concrete, you're not getting a lot of reflectance. It's being refracted because it's kind of all the light's bouncing in different ways. The goal is to react inside of that concrete, fill all those little gaps up, and then you can even come back later and polish it, hone it, and have that light being reflected, right? And you'll see some examples here in a little bit of a really good distinction of image, a high shine, so to speak. What's the benefits, right? Why are we even using these? If you're looking at a piece of concrete or a floor that's going to be in use for a long time, there's a lot of different options for sealing concrete. Some of the basic ones are topical acrylics. They're really nice products. They get sprayed down and they sit on top of that concrete to protect it. Problem is they're a maintenance issue, right? After a couple years, they're a wear item. They're going to wear, tear, and be abused. You have to reapply them. Epoxies are great and phenomenal. They're also expensive, and they act as a vapor barrier, so you have to have moisture barrier underneath it, and a lot more considerations there, and they're a little bit more expensive to apply, and they're not good for all applications. Uh, water repellents. Water repellents are great for outside, but are you really gaining a lot of benefit inside? So a densifier style product really fits in a really nice niche as far as sealing and applying to concrete for internal service or application. And again, we talked about this. It reduces the porosity, so you're closing off all those pores, right? While you might get some topical staining, it's a lot easier to clean. You're not getting a lot of penetration. And a matter of fact, a lot of times you can get a really pretty decent beating or rejection of water at the surface. Uh, and because we got that crystalline spiky structure, giving it strength at that near surface, you're now going to be more scratch and abrasion resistant. Dragging stuff across it, you're not going to tear it up. You're not going to wear, tear, and abrade it as much as you would on a normal concrete surface. For internal or interior applications, they're colorless and odorless. You're not going to change what your concrete looks like. You're also not going to change its coefficient of friction for the most part. It stays pretty neutral. There's a lot of testing out there for that. You're not adding a coating to the top. You're not having to worry about putting a non-slip additive into it. You are taking care of your concrete without having to add a lot to it. It just makes it a lot easier to maintain. I've got some pictures later on, black tire marks. If you've got, let's say, a forklift, warehouse area, or anything with hard pneumatic tires, acrylics love to show black tire marks. So we've got a good example of that. Being that it's bare concrete, it doesn't do it as much. So where are we using them? Warehouse floors and big box retail floors. Absolutely love these. A lot of the big warehouses that are coming out, especially tilt up, you're seeing them using just a straight densified floor. It makes it easy to clean, keeps the dust down, not a lot of maintenance on it. Big box retail stores, if you walk into some of these great big stores and it's like a nice shine on the floor, you walk in, it's clean, it's shiny, you got the light distinction coming through. A lot of times what they're doing is they're specifying a good cure, they're densifying it, then they're polishing that product out. So they just got clean, bare concrete with a really high reflectance. Manufacturing plants, incidental food contact, all these products qualify for that. It also keeps it easy to maintain. Garage utility floors, we've had a lot of automotive restoration type places use these type of things, not as much to maintain. Use breweries, wineries, and auto dealerships, schools. And what you're seeing here is actually a school where they did a decorative finish. They had nice concrete. They went through and they dyed it, stained it in a particular pattern, and then they densified it and they polished it out, and it looks really good. And as we're talking, you'll hear me say maybe sealed or polished or honed or ground. There's not a lot of industry standards around densified concrete. ASTM, who normally does a lot of the standards and testing methods, there's no apples to apples comparison testing through them. Now, while it's actually in debate and it's in progress right now, it has been for a number of years. There's standards being developed, but they're not out there yet. But there is the Concrete Polishing Council, and they put out a really nice statement saying, hey, there's a difference between polished and sealed, right? I can seal my concrete with the densifier and reduce ingress materials, lock up the dust, make it more abrasion resistant. But when we're talking about polished concrete, we're talking about more of an architectural finish. And that's going to include a lot of extra work between grinding, honing, and polishing that concrete, just like you would almost like sharpen a knife, right? Or even as sanding wood. There's a lot of, to get a mirror finish or get a high gloss finish or a very smooth finish, it takes multiple steps and multiple levels. Everything from grinding from metal bonded to resin bonded and going up your different levels of refining diamonds. There's a lot to be done there. Concrete Polishing Council also has really nice standards to kind of get people talking in the correct language. Really straightforward, pretty easy to understand. They've got an exposure chart and they also have a polish chart or appearance chart. And so that way, if you say, hey, I want a salt and pepper finish, well, you can say I need a class B finish. And you'll see on the illustration on the left, you've got what's called like a cream finish or a fine finish. And that's where when you're finishing the concrete, you bring up all the cement fines. It's real creamy, smooth, and it's going to be very consistent. Once you start grinding down through that, you're going to start seeing more of the sand. And that sand is going to be more of what they would call maybe a salt and pepper finish. And then you'll see a coarse aggregate if you start burning through all that, where they tamp down that larger aggregate. You'll see a lot of Class C finishes, especially on retrofits, where maybe they're taking a building and they're saying, all right, I'm going to put in a new restaurant or a new shop or whatever, and they pull out old tile, VCT, carpeting. They grind through all the acrylics and lamination, and it'll get down to like the stone or the rock, and they'll polish it out that way. Then on the other side, the appearance, right? Do I just want flat, clean concrete, right? I don't need anything crazy going on here. That's fine. You know, there's an image clarity of 0 to 9. You don't want it to be very hazy. It just looks good, right? As opposed to a satin polished or highly polished, you've got increasing levels of image clarity coming off that concrete. So instead of seeing like a big blob of light, right, above you, it starts cleaning up and the image clarity becomes like, oh, that's a can light, or I can see the light bar as opposed to just a big kind of hazy area. That is often done with a reflectometer. There's specialty tools that you can put on there. That way it's hey, you know, it's a defined tool that's giving me a defined value to get a defined specification. So it's really nice that is out there. So how can we help? What kind of products does Dayton Superior carry? There's different levels of densification, and I would say the first one is a good basic, hey, we're going to be applied, we're going to lock up the dust, we're going to make it a little bit easier to clean, but we don't necessarily need to polish it because we might do something later on down the line. And that would be our Densifier J13. It is a commodity level sodium silicate, good for all day, everyday use. Use it on old concrete, newer concrete. It has been tested against the NSF 61 standard, which is for potable water. It's been tested against CDPH version 1.2, and all that's for is indoor air quality for lead applications. But the benefit to this is, if I got maybe a little bit softer concrete, or if I sweep it and come back the next day and it's still dusty, I could use this. It'll help mitigate some of that, and it will still accept it'll still accept glues, mastics, adhesives the next day. I can still do something on top of that concrete without having to worry about, hey, did I do too much? Did I take away all the porosity to where my glue or adhesive or coating or topping isn't going to want to bond to this? Kind of its companion product, the Densifier Concentrate J12, it's expensive to ship water, right? And so this is a concentrated version of the J13. So if I need to ship it long distances, and then on the job site, I can just add water at the correct ratio, and then I've got a good product to use. PENTRA-HARD Densifier J17. This has been an excellent product for us and has been used for decades in polished concrete and densified floors. It is, again, we had it tested against the Mass Certified Green CDPH 1.2 for for LEED certification or indoor air quality compliance. It's what we call a scrub-in installation, and we'll cover that here in a little bit. These floors will polish up. They'll look really good. They're very good at rejecting water. It's been used on millions and millions of square feet, and it's a very good product. On the newer scale, the lithiums, we've got the PENTRA-HARD Densifier. And the PENTRA-HARD is a spray down, is a much easier spray down application and kind of mop it in if you've got any puddles. This product is compatible with newer concrete, and I'll discuss that in just a moment. Again, all of the densifiers can be used with colored concrete. It's going to be a pretty easy application. We'll just spray it down. But in this case, we'll use it with new concrete in conjunction with the membrane-forming curing compound. The lithiums are easier to use on newer concrete, and you'll see some densifiers are used on new concrete. We'd like to default back to industry standards because they're there for a reason and they protect concrete and prevent creasing, cracking, and other issues. So we're going to say cure your concrete with a membrane forming curing compound. We have found that the PENTRA-HARD densifier works very, very well on hard trowel burnished concrete, followed up by the densifier, and once that's applied and dried in, put your cure on it the same day. And that way you are, for fast track applications or for tilt up applications, it's a very easy way to accomplish a few steps in essentially a day. By curing that concrete, now protected, and that's going to come off over time. We've got a success story here where it's been used with warehouses. They hard troweled it. They put the densifier down immediately after they got the hard trowels off, and then once that was applied and dried in, they put the cure in on top of it. That cure was then used with the bond breaker application and had no problems. They were able to lift, place, complete, and then when they cleaned the cure and any residual bond breaker off the slab, they were left with good, clean, sound concrete that's already been densified, and they were able to walk off and go. One of the other benefits is that by closing off a lot of that porosity at the near surface with that densifier, in the tilt-up application, it can also help with some of your osmotic defects where you've got water transfer going between the panels and the structural slab and moving back and forth. By having the bond breaker membranes there and a densified slab, it really kind of helps slow that down. PENTRA-HARD Guard. That is the companion product to the PENTRA-HARD densifier. This is what you would call kind of like a micro coating. It's going down somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,500 to 2,000 square feet per application. It's a very, very, very light, very thin application. It's part of what we call the durable floor system. And while the densifier does a very good job rejecting, this product will do a very good job beading. So let's say I have fresh concrete, it's been densified, I put this on there and I drop water on it, it's going to beat up like a freshly waxed car. It's going to have really nice beading effect. It helps reduce any incidental staining at the surface. And the other benefit, and you can kind of see it in that brochure, once you apply this, you can buff it in and buff it out. And as you put that burnisher on it or buff it, it will develop a low sheen on that concrete. So a way to cheat up a sheen or a shine without having to go through the polishing process. Then we have the PENTRA-HARD finish. PENTRA-HARD finish, PENTRA-HARD Guard, very similar, except the finish has a much higher solids content. So instead of having to do 2-3 coats with the guard, you may be able to get by with 1 coat of the finish. Right? Just a higher solids product. Again, it's part of the durable floor system. You could use either the guard or the finish to accomplish that. And just to have a brief discussion on the densifiers and how they're applied, we talked about the J17 being a scrub-in style densifier, and there's a bunch of them on the market, but to give you an idea, you are going to flood the floor with the densifier, right? So I'm going to take that and I'm literally pouring it out kind of like you see here. You want a standing head on top of that surface. And then you're going to spread it around with a broom. We're going to have a good uniform coating of the densifier on there. You want it to be wet, and you don't want it to dry. So what you're going to do is you're going to pour it out, spread it out, and then keep it wet, keep it from drying out. As that stays wet, you're going to probably work that material for the first 15, 20, 30 minutes. And when I say work it, mechanical scrubbers work really well, ride-ons, soft brooms, bristles, all that works. After about 15, 20 minutes, it's going to tend to thicken up a little bit, right? It's starting to react, starting to do what it needs to do. We're going to keep it wet, right? We're keeping that product wet, and then we're going to work it for about another 5 minutes, right? So we have flooded the floor. We're going to work that material in. We're breaking the surface tension, helping that absorb in as much as it possibly can. As it thickens up, we're going to re-wet it, and then we're going to rinse it off, right? And it's a little bit of an exaggeration, but you just don't want dried material on the surface, right? Because we want this product to react inside the concrete. We don't want to see it. You shouldn't be able to look at a piece of concrete and say, that's densified and that's not, without having to do a little evaluation to it. So if you're using a colored concrete, you don't want a haziness on it. So you just rinse it, squeegee it, rinse it again, and you're done. While it sounds daunting, it's really not as much as it might sound, but it is a little bit more labor than what we're going to look at. If that sounded like a lot to look at, we've got a quick application guide here. Again, you're flooding, work it in, re-wet it, work it for a minute, and then rinse it off. Here's a really nice, I've mentioned it earlier, a really nice picture of a warehouse that had an acrylic cure and seal on it. So during the build out phase, they said, hey, we're going to put an acrylic on here. It's going to be great. It's going to protect the concrete. And over time, you've got fork trucks on it, right? Hard black rubber wheels, a lot of pivoting, a lot of turning, and it makes the floor look dirty, right? And it's very hard to clean that. Acrylics are cleanable. You can clean them, you can remove them, and you can replace them. Or in this case, you can strip it, apply a penetrating densifier, and you can already see just the massive difference between them, right? You've got a dark, dingier floor with that acrylic that's still there and it's still protecting, just not attractive, versus something that's going to be reflect a little bit more light, make it look a little bit nicer. The reflectance also increases the light that's in that facility. Moving on to the PENTRA-HARD densifier. Now, I told you could place it on fresh concrete, and here's a couple pictures of that. So as soon as I'm getting my hard trials off, is normally the time you'd place a cure. In this case, we're kind of sneaking in a step, and we're saying, hey, well, as you get your hard trial off, it's already a little drying out just a little bit on the surface anyway. It's a little absorptive. Apply the PENTRA-HARD, right? Apply it right after that hard trial comes off. Another picture of it with it being with the walls up and roof over it. High volume, low pressure sprayer, nothing crazy. You've got drum sprayers. You can use pump up sprayers. You're spraying it down. You want that product to be wet on the surface. You want to apply it to what's applied to rejection. So you're spraying it until it soaks in and won't soak in anymore. If there's any light puddles after about 15 minutes, take a soft broom or a microfiber mop and move the product around or move it off. Again, we don't want to leave puddles of material on the surface to dry. We want that product to react inside that concrete. And once the densifier is dry, once that concrete is dry, it's ready to go. In this case, after you apply the densifier, we'd recommend applying a cure. And here's a really good example of that as well. This was a project where they applied the PENTRA-HARD in a new building. They applied the Clear Cure VOC J7WB, long name but really cool product. The J7WB is made to dissipate in 7 to 14 days inside as opposed to having UV exposure. And so what this company found is that they applied the PENTRA-HARD and they applied the cure on top of it, and just during the build out phase they were cleaning and the walkways clean and everything with an auto scrubber, and they found that the cure came right off, and you can kind of see the edges and corners where that auto scrubber wasn't hitting. But you can see in the main walkthrough, main hallway area, it's already looking really nice, and it's going to be minimum work to turn that product over to the owner. I told you older concrete still works too. This is a couple pictures of older concrete or restorations. So this was a project where they had an older building. They stripped out the old carpet and tile, and you see all that mastic and adhesive on there, real ugly. They went in there with grinders and ground all that out. So they started applying it with a high volume, low pressure sprayer. They spread out any pools of product, and you could see that they've ended up with a very nice, very attractive, and you got a really good sheen back here, polished concrete floor. In this case, that would be like a Class C where you're starting to see the larger aggregate. And again, once it's dry, they can start moving their desks, equipment, everything back into it. Durable floor system, again, mentioned that earlier. That's the PENTRA-HARD in addition to the guard. We've got a couple really nice brochures that are available on our website. Here's a couple nice applications of that. This is a church application. They wanted to make their basement look a little bit nicer, a little bit cleaner, easy to maintain, low odor, but also on budget, right? And so what they did, you can see in the upper left-hand corner, not very attractive, kind of dusty, kind of dirty. They went in and they cleaned it really, really well, did some auto scrubbing. They went ahead and applied the PENTRA-HARD densifier. They let it soak in, cleaned the whole thing out. They ran a burnisher 1500 grit pad over, just kind of get any latents off there. They applied the guard, and then they burnished that back in, and they ended up with really nice reflection. And you can kind of see a good distinction of image here, where you can see each light being reflected into that floor. And even on a residential application, we had a customer come in and say, "Hey, you know, I'm my own GC here, right? I'm building my house, and I want a really good option. I don't want to have anything crazy down. I might have some throw rugs, but I want a good, durable finish that I don't have to maintain to the point that I have to strip and reapply. So we looked at the options. They went with the PENTRA-HARD, and they applied it themselves. And you can kind of see this upper left-hand corner. It's a little dirty, right? It's a construction site. You know, you've got sheetrock, mud, dust, dirt, debris, clay being knocked in, drug in. So they got a swing scrubber. They cleaned it really, really well. They densified it. They came back over it, put the guard product down, a couple coats of that, and then they burnished it back in. And you can see, you know, you've got a reasonable looking floor here, but a good side to side is the top left is in front of the fireplace. Top right is in front of the fireplace as well. Right, pretty massive difference there, and it's a good product that's held up well for them, and they were very, very happy with it. So we've covered a lot in a very, very short amount of time, but we have a lot of really nice resources. So if you go to our website, DaytonSuperior.com, a couple examples here. The middle is a search. So in the upper right-hand corner, you say Densifiers, or you search for a product, and it will have, this is kind of like the search page right there in the center. And it's got the J13, J17, PENTRA-HARD densifier. So those are the main densifiers we just discussed. If you select on one of those, it'll take you to what we call like a landing page. And that's what you see on the left-hand side. It's got the PENTRA-HARD, it's got the logo, description of what it is. And on the left-hand side, it's got an application guide, technical data sheets, any handbooks, safety data sheets. So if you need submittals, you need information, how do I apply this? It's right there. And speaking of a technical data sheet, the right-hand side has got the SureHard Densifier technical data sheet. And it goes over the description, use, any estimating, like how much product am I going to need? Surface prep, and then application, and then it'll have limitations at the end. We also have lots of brochures and handbooks that you can refer back to, a quick guide to or overview of liquid densifiers. And then you've got contacts, right? You've got myself and my colleague Nathan in technical services. We're here. We'll take your calls and walk you through what we can. There's technical sales reps out in the market, and they are in different regions. We've got those, and you can, bottom left-hand side, you can kind of pull up a map to see who's in your area. And then we have the dealer sales managers who work day-to-day with distributors and vendors in your market. With that, that's about it for me right now. I'm going to turn this back over to Heidi for any other questions, concerns.
Thank you, Matthew. That was very insightful. So everybody, we're a little over, but if you have any questions, feel free to go ahead and put them into the chat right now, and we'll get things going for you. With that, there, as you see on the screen, if you have any suggestions, feel free to contact Chuck and myself. That training at DaytonSuperior.com goes straight to us. In addition, these, like Matthew said, this is just very high level. If you want a training that is more geared to what you need for customized, contact us through training at DaytonSuperior.com, and we can see what we can do for you. Build out something that's a little more in depth and that can you can use for your company. All right, so if there's no questions, just a reminder, sign up for the next Training Tuesday. It is continuing with the chemical month. We have these every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern, and they're always located out on YouTube channels or DaytonSuperior.com. Just search for Training Tuesdays, and you can find two links. One will let you sign up, and the other shows you the past videos. And with that, I'd like to thank Matthew for taking the time and energy to tell us all about it. I thought those were great examples. And everybody have a happy Tuesday. Until next time. Bye now.
Thank you.